This is a pretty simple ornament overall, mostly just 3-corner chips as the main design, and then some snowflake embellishments and these little lines around the outside. But it's these extra things that kind of add some flair and make this more ornate than it otherwise would be. So figured I'd share some of that process with you here, kind of the extra stuff. Lots of opportunities to see triangular chips carved. But for lines like this, obviously as a straight line, it's important to get that as straight as we can and follow the line as exactly as possible. One tip for it is to carve the inside of these lines first, and on the next section I'll explain why that is. So on this line, the grain direction of the wood's going this way, and so I'm start by carving against the grain, and then along, and then with the grain on the second half of this. And if I were to carve the outside first, that frees up the chip, so then it's going to lift as I'm carving. And in this case, if I carve the outside and then I come through, the knife is going to want to get caught up in the grain, and it's going to start to run ahead and kind of rip the chip out rather than keeping it cutting evenly. But if you do the inside first, the outside of this is still attached and holding the chip in place, so you don't have to worry about that. So now I've done the inside, come along and get the outside done. And I'll demonstrate this more on the next section, but one thing I'm doing here is, as I'm carving, and especially as I'm going from along the grain to against the grain, focusing on moving the wood more so than moving the knife, and that helps prevent the grain from kind of directing the knife. It keeps the cut smooth and where you want it. So for these straight and almost straight lines, I was using this standard knife with kind of the thicker amount of wood here. For these ones that have this kind of tight curve, I'm going to switch to this blade with less metal. It's more agile to carve through. And so again, this one's tough because the way it curls, the same edge is on the inside of these curves, but then it becomes on the outside of these curves. So I don't know that there's necessarily an ideal way to do that, because these are tighter curves, and the grain, there's less opportunity for it to run along the grain. I'm not as worried about that issue carving outside first on the tighter curve, but for the other part, that could be an issue on perhaps a section like this that's still a pretty tight curve, but more so coming around this area. And again, this is an area where precision is very important, because we've got this uncarved gap between these two lines, and it's a pretty small gap. So if that wavers, if the distance between those two lines changes more than any tiny amount, it becomes much more noticeable. So I want to make sure to follow these lines as tightly as possible, which I think I got a bit off there. We'll see once the chip comes out what kind of pattern line remains. So again, moving the wood and mostly keeping the knife still at this point. One thing that's particularly challenging about these is how small the wood is and how curvy it is. I don't have anything to rest my hand on for a lot of these tighter areas. So definitely takes some practice, basically carving with the cutting hand kind of floating in space. Again, I came off that line, so I'll finish this up and come back and touch up those lines. One thing I'll have to be aware of and careful of in touching up those lines is the grain on those straight bits is going to be play more of a role since it's such a thin area. Finish up this little scrolly part. Okay. I'm going to call that good. I did miss a little bit here. You can see that black pattern line, but that's right at the grain transition. There's a small amount, it's a thin line, and all of that, kind of my experience leads me to believe that if I were to try to mess with that too much more, I'm going to end up actually making it worse. So one thing I can do is wait until after it's done, and I remove the pattern lines and see how it looks on its own. Right now it stands out a lot because the black is there, but once it's done it might not be as obvious. So I'll come and trim off this little bit. You can see these really are very fine ribbons of wood coming off. Okay, same here, these little stuff I'm not going to worry about at this point. So for the last part, these little snowflakes, they're pretty faint because I partially erased them already, and the reason for that is that this tool that I use, the stab knife, doesn't remove wood, it just kind of crushes and spreads it out. And so once I stab these snowflakes in, I can't get inside the wood to remove the toner that's on here. So I want to do my best to not really have it there at all. So I line up the pointy part of this into the triangle of each of those and just push down, kind of rock it until the point comes in the middle. I'll do that for each of the 6 sides of the snowflake here. This is another one. It's easy to kind of view it as extra, but I found when trying to do these snowflakes it's important to keep them even and symmetrical and all the segments of it pretty much the same. And so I can see this one's bigger than this one, and it, at least to my eye, kind of makes it look not as good. And I want to make sure these aren't really like standing out and calling attention. So I'll just kind of even those out a little bit more. And another thing to notice is they're in different orientations and they're different sizes, and the goal here is to mimic snowflakes, so they're not all going to be the same size and orientation and everything. So trying to mimic that with each of these. I'll do one more for demonstration here, but otherwise these are all just the exact same thing. Alright, and so now you can see that wood is kind of just folded down and crushed inside of itself, so any remaining toner I'm not able to erase out of there. But with as faint as these are, it mostly gets absorbed by the shadow, and especially if I use any stain, you're not going to notice that little bit. So I really should probably, on my pattern, I've got a file that I just print these off to do them. I should probably go in and actually make the snowflakes more faint so I don't have to do the erasing myself on the pattern. But stuff like that's kind of just ways to realize optimization and make the actual carving a bit easier on yourself in the planning stage.